Aloha. During the last segment of Ikava Mamu, Ikava Mahope, our panelists, our board members spoke about change. And what was that change? That undergirding of that conversation was really about leadership. As we aspire to go and transform and discover the future and believe in our community, it was about leadership. And the leadership that is courageous, that leadership that is present, that leadership that is wise. We know that we have to come together as a community, and it's not an easy task, but how do we have those discussions? How do we transform our relationships so that we were recognizing that in this ecosystem, everyone is relevant, but how do we help everyone's relevance to emerge for the entirety? During the last or third segment, my board members are going to speak about change, but not just change to change, but to drive us towards the future. What is that? What are we looking at as far as how this is applied towards our children, towards the organizations that we serve, towards businesses who have been here for a very long time, who are competing against tremendous storms that have interest in globalization and even encroaching upon our homes. We hope you find value.
Being the leader of a nonprofit organization today is not easy. How do I face the challenges of our rapidly changing society? How do I lead and evolve my organization to ensure relevancy in my community? How do I engage my board, my staff, and my volunteers to embrace the changes I need to make? Thankfully, the Oahu Economic Development Board has created a television series to help. Ikava Mamua, Ikava Mahope.
Thank you for joining us for a brand new program here on Olelo. Ikava Mamua, Ikava Mahope means to seek the future, we must look deeply to the past. In this three-part series, we've been having a fantastic discussion with some of our community's most prominent and influential individuals who have served or currently serve on the board of the Oahu Economic Development Board, or OEDB. Now, in the previous segments, we've shared personal stories which have provided insight into how to transform a struggling organization into a sustainable and self-reliable one, using the OEDB as an example. And while no organization is perfect, the hope is by sharing the lessons learned and out-of-the-box thinking of those in the OEDB, other organizations and agencies can also find their path to success. How do we use what we've recognized and addressed as issues and solutions and move forward to recover a thriving future for Hawaii and her people? So with us in our final segment is Mahina Paishon-Duarte. Mahina is head of school at Halau Kumana Public Charter School. Also with us is Nelson Lau. Nelson is a partner at KPMG LLP. And rounding out our panel is Tyler Tokioka. Tyler is Vice President of External Affairs at Island Insurance Company. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Now let's begin with Mahina. And Mahina, how does your work with OEDB support what you are doing in education and entrepreneurship here in Hawaii?
Sure. I just wanted to share a little bit of a personal story. My personal story is as a school administrator, I actually just walked away from school administration for 10 years. And what I want to do is I want to cue you into some of the conversations that I bore witness to. Mm-hmm. I was working really late one night, and I overheard some students that were working really intently to finish some of their dual credit work. And kudos to them that they're earning a high school diploma as well as an associate's degree while in high school. But what troubled me and what really struck me was that they were talking about their fears. They were fearful of not being able to make it here in Hawaii. So they were trying to study hard so that they would get into a great college, knowing or feeling as if they wouldn't be able to afford to come home. And that really hurt me. That really hurt me to hear their fear in their voice. And so what I really appreciate about our time at OEDB is that I get to learn. I get to learn with. I get to learn from these industry leaders. And why that's so important is because if I'm charged with the kuleana, with the responsibility to prepare our workforce, we need to work across sectors. We need to work in partnership and in concert so that we are creating the jobs of the future. Because if we don't reconcile the workforce gap and the talent gap, then we're hitting the mark completely.
Exactly. So the students that you work with at the charter school, they're being influenced by both Hawaiian culture and how to work within a global community as well, right?
That's correct.
And that must be a challenge.
It is a challenge. You know, working with many of the students that I have worked with, had the pleasure of working with, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to ignite their passion from within. We're trying to get them to understand what are their talents, what are their gifts. That's another great thing that we talk about in our board sessions. That's very different from other boards that I currently serve on or served in the past. We really focus on how do we create opportunities so that we can leverage our youth's talents and their gifts and then make that be the focus of a new economy.
Well, that's very, very interesting, and I think that there's a lot of work to do, and it takes a whole community, right, to make that change. And as that's what we were talking about, like, where do we go next? Where's our next step as in our next generation of hopeful business leaders? Maybe someday that's an important part of understanding where they play, what their role is in the community as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Nelson, let's talk with you. Okay. As chair of the Olelo board and board member of OEDB, what does it mean to step outside of the box to create a future for the desire that you see?
Right. Well, thank you. And I think, you know, I look at the opportunity we have here today. It's just, you know, being part of Olelo as well, and looking at some of the objectives that we set out as an organization. We want to empower individuals to be able to have their ability to communicate their messages to the community, give them the tools in order to do that, and then really help them engage in that communication and that sharing of information. So as we sit as an organization like Olelo, we take a look at opportunities and where we can best leverage our role in the community. So if you take a look at, say, for example, the children in our community, education, we have the opportunity to be in certain schools and throughout the island, provide them the opportunity to work with Olelo through training, through education. We have programs like Youth Exchange. We also just recently, with the opening of the legislature, have Live at the Legislature to give them an opportunity to reach out to the community, hone their skills in the way of enhancing their communication, and really be a part of providing even the legislators an opportunity to share their message. And getting those two groups together, I think, is really a good example of how we sort of think outside the box and finding ways to leverage off of the unique opportunity we have as an organization to get people to move along with their message and get that out and share it with the community, to really be a good, good part of having the opportunity and the ability to share. I think is really important, and a way that we could take this in a more of a outreach perspective and working with various not-for-profits as well as another opportunity that we use here, and trying to provide them an opportunity to share their message, because I think that's important, because there's so much going on in the community that sometimes it's really hard to find ways to get your word out, and I think having the opportunity to give them chances to share their message is really key.
Exactly. So what you're also saying then is it's okay to be creative in how you're going to move forward and take the changes that you recognized and make those changes within your own community.
And I think, part of it is also, taking a look back, like we talked about earlier, and trying to see how effective we are in doing the programs that we're doing. And sometimes you have to make changes. Sometimes you need to assess, are we really being effective in our programs? And maybe we need to step back and rethink about the way that we deliver. Do we reach out to the right people? Are we making the impact that we hope to make? And when we set out with any particular program, and it takes input from everyone. So everyone's voice is important, the people we serve, our own team, people on the board is really just making sure that we keep everyone involved in communication so they understand what we're trying to achieve, and then along the way really understand, are we getting to where we need to be, and then circling back as a group collectively, both internally and external, to make sure are we hitting our mark. And if we're not, we need to make changes. And sometimes those changes take time, but I think it's helpful as a team that we work together to make sure we're all pointed in the same direction.
Exactly, and so I guess that's a good process is what you're recommending, and that's maybe something you see at OEDB too, is where you take these steps forward, make an assessment, and then continue if it's working. If it's not, then make those changes and start
it's
over
okay
again.
because sometimes you're going to make you're going to have a program or something that you feel really strong about, and maybe it doesn't turn out the way you believe it should, but that's okay. I think you still have a dream, you still have an objective, and maybe there's another way. You seek out the help of others, reach out to see what may not have worked, and get their input, because like communication, it's always on both sides, and what I intend to convey to you may not be received the way I intended, and then I should understand that and then find ways that I could better do that.
Thank you, Nelson. That's interesting.
Sure.
Tyler, let's talk with you now. We know that Island Insurance is the only locally owned insurance company in the state, and that your grandfather, Masayuki Tokioka, was one of the original founders of the company. So I think that what you're sharing, what you plan to share with us, is significant to any business here in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, so for us, we've been around now for almost 80 years in business. And what we try to look back to is really the values of which our companies were founded on. And the primary value that we always look back to is that there is a strong reliance on the success of the community. As the community, as we prosper, so should the community as well. Because in order where we get our business from is through the community. We also want to be a strong resource to that community, whether we provide jobs for those that are living here, as well as opportunities for those that want to come back to also have that opportunity to work and gainfully employed in the state of Hawaii. We also try to focus on the state of Hawaii because we want to make sure we give back. It's highly important that we give back to the community. We're stewards, and we're lucky to have been part of and continue to give back to the community in that respect. The other one is just, we want to make sure that the values of hard work, again, support, family, are all things that we push and coordinate with our employees so that they feel the same sense that they also have to give back. Maybe not that they have to give back, but they want to give back to the community. We're all in it together, and what we try to also make sure we communicate with everybody is that we do have to make a profit as a business organization, as a for-profit organization. But the amount of profit we need to do is only because in order for us to stay in business and to, again, support the community to the level that we'd like to, we have to be in business. We have to make a profit. If we don't make a profit, we close down and we're no longer an asset to the community. But those are kind of the values that we try to reinforce and hopefully engage with the community properly.
Do you feel that as a locally owned company that you have a certain responsibility, more so than maybe any other insurance company, to really keep in mind the state and its residents and its people and its values as a state?
I think as a locally owned company, regardless of whether it's insurance or whatnot, I think we are uniquely positioned to appreciate the values that given to us through our parents and our grandparents. And Hawaii is a special place. It's a melding of multi-cultures with common values, and I think that's what's made us special and allowed us to succeed where others have not. And really, it's the values that from our ancestors and those that have gone before that help us to get through the rough times. When things aren't going the way we want it to go, when things are a little more difficult, it's the values that smooth it out and say, okay, this is why we're doing what we do. This is why we have to push a little bit harder to succeed. And that will help us carry through to the future. So much like as the discussions have been going, we do have to step back sometimes and look to our past to help us push forward into the future.
Knowing that what we've discussed in these 3 segments, a lot of it has to do with just a very unique community that we live in Hawaii, where it's not all about just the bottom line of making money. There's a really greater role that any business, any organization has to play here in Hawaii. And so now, as we said, once you've recognized what that issue might be that your organization, your business is struggling with, hopefully, what would be your optimistic look at how our community will be able to take these lessons that we're learning today and hear the stories and maybe use them in the future? Is there a certain idea that you see that's going forward in our community today that hopefully we'll be using some of these ideas? I mean, are you kind of seeing that as we go? I'm saying, I'm kind of asking if you can be very psychic here and predict the future. But
what I see is important, especially I think Tyler hit on it earlier, is we're part of a community. I mean, what we're very lucky is the community that we have here in Hawaii is very unique in that I think we all find ways and we all understand that we all rely on one another to be successful. And we don't win because at the expense of someone else, but instead the best situation is that we win because everybody wins. And I think that's the sort of the attitude we all need to take, because if you take a look at some of the struggles companies have had in the past, to the extent that if you look at it from an outsider's point of view coming in, when they make a decision to invest in Hawaii, it may start off as just being purely a business decision. An investment is made and then they look purely at the return from a dollar and cents perspective. When in fact, when we invest in the community, it's not necessarily we expect a return in dollars and cents, but instead we invest in the community because we understand that, as Tyler said earlier, the strength of the community will support each of us. So if we make that broader investment to build a good foundation, what we end up being is that we're in a better situation for everyone. Right? We provide opportunities in all different industries. We provide opportunities for our children, as it could be from education, experience, which you don't put a dollar sign around. And I think that's really what I would hope for from a future perspective, is that we don't base our decision just purely on dollars and cents, but instead looking at the longer goals and to see the time and effort that we spend and what that would mean to not just ourselves, but our children and the generations that follow.
I think that's pretty much the crux of what we are trying to do in this series, is trying to help others that are really seeing themselves in this situation and what to do. So when it comes to education, maybe what is some of the lessons that you try and instill at their young age, as far as understanding that they have a much bigger role and in the community beyond the classroom?
Yeah, so I think healthy schools, healthy organizations, healthy companies are really founded in the character, the integrity of individuals. And so for me, as a former school principal, what OEDB really helps me with, it gives me a vulnerable and safe space to really reflect inward and to really consider, different perspectives that I might not look at typically outside of my education world. And I think that's so critical, to be able to be knocked off of your feet sometimes, so that you can kind of disrupt their normal mode of operation, your mode of thinking. And the reason why I say that, and maybe perhaps the greatest gift I can give to any student that I interact with, is this. One, the world is changing. We know this. And that, like our ancestors, whether Hawaiian, whether Japanese, Chinese, and all the other beautiful ethnic groups that make up Hawaii, we know that they are innovative, that they are survivors, that they're dynamic, and that they continue to thrive because of their values, like these gentlemen have said. And so if I can help them to remember that we come from that legacy of innovation, and yet they need to apply that type of thinking, that courage, so that they can be the new creators, the new educators, the new innovators, the new healers. And what I've been telling all of my friends and colleagues in our education system, because I just have this kind of a renewed sense of commitment to education, is that Hawaii is a world-class education system. We are home to a world-class education system. And that's not what we typically talk about. We talk about sometimes our failures. We really focus on that and what we lack. But look, we've produced brilliant artists, community leaders, President Obama, Bruno Mars, Tuka Hanamoku, folks that are celebrated throughout history and in the world. So we know that we can produce some of the most brilliant minds. So with that and with our legacy, we just need to push. And to be able to push, we have to look inward and be courageous in our leadership in moving Hawaii, all of Hawaii forward.
And that's the magic, I think, of OEDB, is that the purpose of the organization is to try to foster hope for the future, for our young ones. And hope in the sense that we bring a bunch of business leaders together from different industries so that we can communicate and share where we're going, so that we know and understand, I think, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And if to some extent, if we can work together to make those accomplishments happen, then again, even more hope is given to the young ones.
Yes.
To say, yes, there is a future for you when you're ready and willing. We have a place for you to work. We have a place for you to earn a living. We have a place for you to raise your family. All of this is very, very important. And then if we can engage those values that we want them to learn, we want them to be instilled with, then organizations that are not necessarily based in Hawaii that may not have those values, those that come in from outside, let's instill those values into them so they can take, you know, we like to call the aloha spirit beyond our shores, so that we can, again, hopefully teach the world what it is to work together. Again, you know, so this place has a magic, and I think that's what we want to have to be able to share with everybody.
I think I heard Nainoa Thompson say once, you know, why can't Hawaii be the school for the world,
Right.
the classroom for the world, so we can set the example.
Educated in Hawaii.
There you go, there you go. But moving forward. So some of the discussion from earlier included using examples of thinking out of the box, which is something you mentioned, and also then using some of the philosophy of understanding that you have a responsibility to where you live in this community. It's not about money, which is something we talked about. That's a much bigger role, and then finding the right people to serve and step up and make those changes and take those risks. That's also a really critical part of recognizing what your issues are as a community, in an organization, and then what your role is in the community. So that's something, again, that you discussed today as far as where we're going to go and moving forward. And then using that change is communication and having a relationship, which is something I think the values that you mentioned that still is very relevant in any organization as well. And then going forward, education and instilling the next generation and making them understand that there's a much bigger role here as well. And we have a unique community and a unique state to make these changes and be an example to be a better organization. And I think this is a really interesting discussion. It's very exciting. OEDB has a very unique role in setting an example, I believe. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Right, and I think you mentioned part of it is also being willing to take risks. Right, sometimes you have to go out of your comfort zone, because you know, I know part of the discussion here, we're talking about how, you know, what other organizations may struggle with, and you know, some organizations may have been, you know, through some challenges, and things change, right? We all understand. Mahina talked about the environment is changing. Some of the things that worked before may not work any longer and may need to be revisited. And you know, just being willing to open the discussion up and to say, look, let's revisit this, and maybe what we're doing is fine, but maybe we need to make a few changes just because the environment is changing. We talked about communication, and just the way that we communicate now is different. You know,
Very different.
Electronics take such a big part of what we do. There's constant communication coming in from other other sources that sometimes, you know, we get lost in the middle of this, and we have to find ways to be effective in the way that we spend time with each other and the way that we get our points across, so we can all be part of the same group and still feel included in the process. So that's a challenge too, because I think more than ever, there's so many inputs coming into everyone every single day that it's almost, you almost feel like you have to constantly be in front of people in order to get their attention. And you know, that's never used to be the case in years past, but if you don't constantly have that effort, you get the appearance that you're falling behind, or you're no longer part of the conversation. So it's hard. But again, it just takes a collective effort from everyone to recognize that we all need to work on this together. And I think through that, you know, we'll move it a little bit further than it is at this point.
Optimism is the key.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Mahina. Thank you, Tyler. And this has been a very insightful, very informative discussion that we've had, all three segments. So thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for sharing your stories.
Well, thank you
Mahalo.
for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. And I hope through this program you've enjoyed and gained insight into growing and creating your own successful organization. And thank you to Olelo, which through this program we will continue to share insights on the issues and look for ways to build the foundation for a stronger, thriving community. So for more information on OEDB, and if you'd like to have OEDB come talk to your company or your board, you can contact them through their website, oedb.biz. Thank you and aloha.
Aloha. Thank you for joining us in Ikava Mamua Ikava Mahope. We know that many maybe have future questions. We weren't here to answer all of them. It was maybe to stimulate your questions that maybe can foster the aspirations that your organization, you have for our community, and to also let you know how relevant and important everyone is. We also want to make ourselves available to you. We do this quite a bit in the community. Folks call us. They would like to speak, just talk, maybe discover. Maybe sometimes they just need to ask some hard questions about their organizations, whether it's going to be able to make it even another month. We thank you. We hope this has been helpful for you. We also hope that maybe at some point you might consider being a part of this program, Ikava Mamua, Ikava Mahope, so that you can share your story of the past, so that maybe we can find a future as well.